And this is Units of History, the Byzantine Fire Ships, Ancient Super Weapons Documentary. You know, I know about them, but I guess I never thought about how it even works. Like, yeah, it sounds pretty crazy. And we see, you know, Byzantine is like, you know, it's still part of the Roman Empire. Like, it's like, you know, the rest of the Roman Empire after like the Europe one was kind of dying, right? So it's not like thousands of years ago, but it still sounds insane, especially with the visual. Like, how would this fire ship work? So yeah, let's check it out. So yeah, by Invicta. Here we go.
In the year 717 AD, the Byzantine Empire was on the verge of collapse.
Okay.
Arab conquests devoured their lands, and now a massive Umayyad force, 20 years in the making, was bearing down upon Constantinople itself,
100,000
with
men.
over 100,000 men and nearly 5,000 ships. Defending the city were a meager 15,000
I tend to
soldiers
leave
of
the
the empire.
subtitles, but I tend to like have such an habit with anime and all that to read ahead. So like, you know, the night I said the first word and I've already finished the sentence, I'll just take off the subtitles.
However, in their darkest hour, they would be saved by secret super weapons of the Byzantines. At the critical hour, dragons emerged to bathe the invaders in streams of hellfire. These were the fire ships, which would protect the city for centuries to come.
Like the ship itself that they're riding and, you know, flame-throwing farm is like wood, so how does this even work?
And change the course of history.
I'm gonna say it's probably something like it's firing some oil that's on fire, but again, how does it not burn the ship it's on? Let's see. Let's learn.
While fire has long held a reputation as a great destroyer, it can also be used as a life giver and creator. This duality and humanity's fascination with it is best exemplified by our love of fireworks, which you can learn much more about through our sponsor Magellan TV. Their series Pyro's Painting with Fire is a fascinating dive into the lives of those who seek to tame our age-old nemesis and turn it into a work of art.
Seems great.
In it, you follow teams of pyrotechnicians across the world as they compete to put on the most dazzling and daring displays imaginable. If you're like me and you've always wondered what goes on behind the scenes of fireworks shows, then this series is just for you. Documentary videos like this are added weekly to Magellan TV, which already has a collection of over 3,000 videos to choose from among the categories of history, science...
You know, not to be that guy, but on one hand I think like, you know, it seems cool, but at the same time with the quality, like literally this video, right, this channel, like the quality of the free YouTube documentary that you get, it feels weird that they're like trying to sell you a paid documentary service on a video documentary for free of this quality, right? It just seems... like, a bit weird? I don't know, maybe it's just me.
Nature, space, and more. You can watch Pyro's Painting with Fire or any documentary that catches your interest by clicking the link in the description below or going to try.magellantv.com/invicta to get a 1 month free trial. Enjoy.
So tell me about the fire ships.
Fire has been man's greatest ally and his greatest enemy since long before written record. From the warm light of the hearth and the deadly roar of the forest fire, our species learned very quickly not to drift too closely to the flames. And from that fear and respect came low cunning. In the age of close-packed wooden cities, thatched roofs, great granaries and vast fields, fire became a potent weapon. Such was its reputation that it became synonymous with unrestrained violence. For many militaries, this was a selling point in and of itself. However, there was always a desire to exert some control over this most destructive force of nature.
I mean, to this day, fire is great in the world.
It is in this search that early man turned to his environment. Here, natural products such as pitch, oil, resin, and animal fat proved ideal for the creation of incendiary payloads. Some of our earliest records of this come from Assyria, where 9th century BC reliefs can be seen depicting the use of fire arrows and exploding pots. Over the years, this technology would undergo further research and development by the various civilizations of the age. Much of this activity is unfortunately lost to us, and we are only left with a few contemporary accounts testifying to its details. Many militaries, especially in the Middle Ages, relied heavily on fire to protect their cities. However, there was always a desire to exert some control over this most destructive force of nature. Much of this activity is unfortunately lost to us, and we are only left with a few contemporary accounts testifying to its details.
Okay.
In India, for instance, the Artha Shastra documents the advancements being made to fire weapon technology and tactics at the time, while the laws of Manu further reveal how prohibitions were put in place to attempt to limit their devastation. It's
okay,
fascinating.
Yeah, like, that's the thing. Like, when you think about it, fire is just so broken. It's relatively easy to do, you know, to just like start a fire to one building and it's gonna take on everything. Especially in the days, you know, where like it was much less, you know, like wooden. There was much more wooden stuff, wooden structure, and all that than stone ones. So yeah, fire is always like kind of like a cheat item in a way. When I turn subs on, I add them on and I turn them off because I tend to read ahead. So
glimpse into the ripple effects of the ongoing evolutionary arms race taking place across the world. Our story today, though, will be focused around the specific developments of the Eastern Mediterranean and Near East.
Okay.
The two regions had long been intertwined economically, politically, and militarily, with various incendiary technologies being advanced within this ecosystem.
Yeah.
One example was the Boeotian flamethrower, deployed in 434 BC against an Athenian garrison during the Peloponnesian War. The device featured a tube through which air could be forced into a pot of burning charcoal, pitch, and sulfur, which in turn would erupt outwards towards a target. It proved successful in clearing the walls and was added to the growing list of tools attackers might bring to bear in their sieges.
I guess it seems like to me, you know, I mean, it seems pretty awesome, like super big brain invention, but, you know, it seems kind of overkill when all you had to do was just bring some oil, throw it on the wall, and, yeah, like, I don't know, just lit it on fire. Like, wouldn't it be easier than using like this crazy machine for it? I don't know.
Centuries, yet more innovations would slowly emerge. One of the most popular among these was the use of naphtha weaponry.
Naphtha.
This was a rather broad name for petroleum-derived mixtures, which proved both highly flammable and portable, a potent combination. The Parthian and later Sassanid empires were particularly successful in pioneering its applications when it came to siege warfare. Soon, the Greeks and Romans too began toying with their own mixtures. This would ultimately lead to a pivotal breakthrough.
Okay.
In the early 7th century AD, the Islamic Caliphate was sweeping across the land and threatening to overrun the eastern Byzantine provinces. Among the refugees who fled in their path was a man by the name of Kallinikos, from the Syrian city of Heliopolis. Sources claim he brought with him a new incendiary recipe, simply known as Greek fire.
All right.
To this day, its contents remains a mystery. Part of the confusion comes from the fact that ancient observers seem to use the label as a catch-all term for various combustible materials which were used in that era.
I mean, yeah, obviously, like, it's not that complicated. Like, so much stuff is flammable or like is great to propagate flames, so it could be anything. It's probably nothing like super secret, makes sense.
We have to consider that the Byzantines were very secretive when it came to revealing any specifics of their new superweapon. That being said, researchers tend to believe that the core components of Greek fire were likely naphtha, quicklime, and sulfur. Naphtha is a mixture of crude oil and other fossil fuels such as peat or coal. Quicklime is a white powder refined from limestone or seashells in a lime kiln.
That's flammable.
And sulfur, also known as brimstone, is a naturally occurring substance known for its acrid stench and flammability. Other likely components are resin, wax, and saltpeter. But how they were mixed and in what quantities is the subject of ongoing debate. The Byzantines would have spent some time testing and further refining the new Greek fire. This would have encompassed not just the ingredients, but also its mode of production and delivery. The first trials likely involved the use of hand-thrown grenades made from ceramic pottery, several of which have been found by archaeologists. Such weapons would have been...
For a long time I never realized, but yeah, like stuff like this, a grenade was already a concept back then. I don't know when the word came up, but this is basically a grenade, yeah, like... or you could even call this like a Molotov cocktail, maybe? Way before. And I know like the term Molotov cocktail was like, you know, part of like the... like for Russia and Finland, their war, whatever, back in World War II. But yeah, it's crazy. Like Molotov cocktails, so much back in history.
Fairly straightforward to implement, as the Sassanids had previously pioneered their use with naphtha. The upgrade to Greek fire simply meant a more powerful and longer-lasting explosion.
Okay.
The next trials aimed to further exploit its destructive potential by increasing the volume of incendiary payload. The end result was apparently the creation of a siphon device capable of spewing fire as if it were a dragon.
That seems
Here
crazy.
is an evocative first-hand account recorded by a crusader who faced such a weapon.
I mean, at the time, if you're like fighting enemies that are walking around with this kind of crazy-looking machine that is literally like splitting a trail of fire, I would just turn around. I mean, like, how do you even approach that? You have to try to go around. But maybe this thing is like very straight, so maybe it's not like they can pivot it left and right. Like it's only straight, so if you go around, you can just stab the guy.
The Greek fire was such that seen from the front as it darted towards us, it appeared as large as a barrel of verjuice. And the tail of the fire that streamed behind it was as long as the shaft of a great lance. The noise it made in coming was like that of a thunderbolt falling from the skies. It seemed like a dragon flying through the air. The light which this huge flaming mass shed all around it was so bright that you could see right through the camp as clearly as if it were day. Now, let us take a closer look at the inner workings of this equipment.
Tell me.
The way it worked was that a large bronze container was built to hold the Greek fire mixture. This, in turn, was heated from below by a flame fanned by a bellow. The purpose was not to ignite the material, but to preheat it and thus lower its viscosity for better flow. Once the desired temperature had been reached, an inlet pipe could be pumped with air to pressurize the chamber. The device could then be fired by opening an outlet valve. The heated, pressurized liquid would then race through pipes and out of the nozzle. Here, some sources claim it was lit by a pilot flame which ignited the steam, bathing the target in a fire hose of flames which set everything, including water, ablaze.
What did you say was the timeline for this? Like this was 700? Something like that? That is insane level of like technology. I didn't think it would be this level, yeah, like I don't know. Like the principle of this is feels so advanced for what I think of the technology at the time.
And could not be extinguished. Reports claim such siphons could propel the liquid around 100 feet, while the swivel-mounted head allowed for around a 60-degree firing arc in all directions.
So you can turn it.
It was truly a weapon of devastation.
Burn on the water. I guess if it's throwing liquid with it, yeah, I can see that.
A 2- or 3-man crew. Trained siphonniers would actuate the heating bellows, the pressurizing pump, the release valve, and the swivel. Presumably, the signal to shoot would be granted to an officer who, for the first time in history, would have had reason to use the command word fire.
Good one.
Once the device had been constructed and tested on land, it would then be transferred onto a warship. Typically, these large Greek fire siphons were mounted to the...
I mean, just gonna say, but I'm sure, you know, you could say that people, like, Commander back in the day would set fire with just some guys with torches that count as well, right? Like, fire, literally fire this town up. I think it counts as well.
Prow of a Byzantine dromon. Here, it might be shielded and placed atop a tower for better range and protection. Sources later indicate...
I guess right away I see the use way more for a ship, yeah, like than on land. Because maybe it had wheels or something if it was one solid block of a construction, but it seems like, in an actual battle it wouldn't be that great. Like, if people, like the soldier in front of you are walking toward you and they see the flame, they're just not gonna come closer. And your thing can't really move super fast, so you're gonna struggle to actually hit them. So I see on the ship it would be super useful, because if you have it at the front and you just go toward an enemy ship, they can't move that fast, so it's gonna be easy to run them. Portable version. But on land, yeah, I don't know. Maybe a bit less useful.
The devices might also be mounted along the aft and sides of a ship for even greater firepower. A fully equipped vessel would be virtually unassailable. Now, let us consider their tactics in battle. For context, it must be pointed out that warships of the Mediterranean during this period were still galleys, which resembled their forebears from antiquity. Some changes worth mentioning, though, include new methods of hull construction, the gradual adoption of Lattian sails, and the abandonment of water-level rams in favor of upward-turned spurs. This in turn coincided with a gradual shift in the nature of warfare at sea. Gone were the days of massed naval battles, which had been seen during the Greco-Persian Wars, the Punic Wars, and the Roman Civil Wars. Even in antiquity, such clashes were rare, and combat more often revolved around raiding and anti-piracy activities. When ships did engage, though, battles were typically fought at close quarters. Generally, this involved smaller ships using their speed to circle about their foes, shooting them to pieces and cutting off their oars, while larger ships sought to grapple with the enemy and overwhelm them through boarding action.
Yeah.
The Byzantines used a variety...
But thinking about it, like, couldn't you just do fire arrows? But I guess most of the ships were already, like, wooden back then, so, like, if you have some kind of open fire on the ship during a battle, to light your fire arrows, it might be very dangerous if it's knocked over and suddenly your ship is the one burning. But otherwise, I guess, yeah, you don't need, like, some crazy flamethrower, like, except if it's raining, a few fire arrows into the wooden enemy ship would be enough, no?
Of tactics, depending on whom they were fighting and what ships they had on hand. The introduction of fire ships simplified things. They were by far the most effective tools at an admiral's disposal, and he would do well to make them the center of his battle plan. In doing so, two basic facts had to be considered. The first is that fire ships were often slow, owing to the heavy nature of their armament and their preference for smooth sailing conditions. The second fact is that fire ships had a short range, typically aimed towards the front, and were only capable of hitting targets within a ship's length from them. Taken together, these two principles dictated that fire ships were best used by forcing the enemy to meet the Byzantines head-on at close quarters.
Makes sense, yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
This might be achieved by using terrain to funnel the enemy into the maws of the fire ships, or alternatively by arranging one's fleet in a compact battle order which could only be assailed from a limited direction. All who dared to approach would be met with a wall of fire. Here is how Emperor Leo IV explains the principle in his Tactica. Quote, "You will form the front in a straight line so that, when necessary, you may fall upon the enemy with your prow first.
I just jump.
Then, with the fire from the siphons, you can set their ships ablaze."
I guess with this kind of like old ship, I mean, if you're going forward and you see the fire, it's too late. You ain't gonna turn in time. Like, yeah, and he said they had like still quite a bit of turning, the flamethrower themselves, so even if you're not straight in front of it, you're probably gonna get it. It's terrifying. I mean, it's terrifying. Pretty terrifying.
This would have been an absolutely devastating tactic on both a physical and psychological level.
Yeah.
Those not immediately engulfed in unquenchable flame would turn and run rather than face such horror.
Yeah.
In fact, Greek fire proved so widely feared that the Second Lateran Council in 1139 AD would eventually decree that it was too murderous a weapon to be used in Europe. But such arms limitations, even if they had any teeth, were too little too late.
I'm surprised they cared. I thought, like, you know, until like the madness of World War I, World War II, you know, nobody really ever cared. Like, if they had a weapon that was so useful, they would definitely use it. And obviously, you know, there started to be rules of war for the world in, you know, thanks to World War I and II. But I don't think back in the day there would be any like nation or army that'd be like, yeah, we've got this super weapon, but it's a bit too much. Let's calm down. I'm surprised. We see like burning people is fucked up. Like, you know, I don't really adhere to the idea that there's any like good in war, but we see there's a difference between stabbing someone and burning them alive. But at the same time, if you're just trying to win, I'm surprised they would be like, yeah, it's too much. We need to calm down with the fire. I'm really surprised. That's interesting.
For now, the devastation of Greek fire would be unleashed by the Byzantines upon their foes and turn the tides of history. Let us explore the service history of the fire ships.
Yeah.
This would begin shortly after the delivery of Greek fire to the court of the Byzantines around 672 AD. At the time, the empire had been weakened by internal strife and long wars with the Sassanids, which left them ill-prepared to repel the advances of the Muslim conquests. The invaders quickly seized the former Sassanid lands and began to expand into the domains of the Byzantines. This gave them access to many ports, ships, sailors, and resources with which to now take the offensive to the seas. Arabian fleets now struck across Asia Minor and the Greek Isles, seizing like Cyprus and raiding as far as Sicily.
I thought it was a natural thing.
When Emperor Constans II sailed out to meet them, he would be crushed at the Battle of the Masts in 654 AD. This catastrophe opened the floodgates for further Arab expansion across the Mediterranean. The invaders were only temporarily slowed by civil war and returned 2 decades later to launch a concerted campaign aimed at taking Constantinople itself. In preparation for this offensive, the Umayyad Caliphate had meticulously secured bases along Asia Minor from which to establish a blockade of the Byzantine capital. The stranglehold was tightened each spring as Arab forces hammered away at the troops and fortifications of Constantinople. This relentless attrition went on for over 5 years, keeping the Byzantines pinned in place, while the rest of their empire was devoured by foes on all sides. All hope seemed lost.
But then someone came up with a ship.
Emperor Constantine IV had one final trick up his sleeve: Greek fire. It had been gifted to him by Kallinikos just before the siege began, and ever since his best engineers had madly been working on their secret weapons program. Finally, they were ready.
All right.
In 677 AD, the Byzantine fleet, newly outfitted with the Greek fire siphons, sailed out to meet the Arabs. The invaders were overjoyed to finally have an opportunity to deal a decisive blow to the defenders and charged out to meet them. This was a fatal error.
This is like an accurate
As they approached, gleaming dragon heads were uncovered from the prows of the Byzantine vessels and proceeded to unleash hellfire upon them. To the utter horror
of... For example, I wonder if this is like stylized, just stylized out, or if this is really how it was, because the fire is coming out of like a wooden, like, you know, sculpture, right? Like, it's not the same version as earlier. It's literally coming out of wood, so how do you not burn your own ship firing it, I wonder? But maybe this is just like stylized for coolness.
Arab sailors, entire ships, and the water itself went up in flame. None could escape its grasp, and all efforts to fight it failed. Some chroniclers report that the Umayyad admiral himself was killed, with his entire fleet falling into a panicked retreat.
Yeah.
Constantinople had been saved. Victories on land shortly thereafter
Fire
halted
is the
the
best way to protect
Umayyad
yourself
advance,
from
and a
predator.
30-year truce was signed.
Oops,
The temporary lull allowed the Byzantines to catch their breath, with Justinian II taking particular care to strengthen the navy. Undoubtedly, this would have meant further investment in the...
Isn't Justinian the one... Well, I guess there's a couple of Justinian. Wasn't he the one at the time of Belisarius? But it's probably another one, I'm thinking.
fire ships. The Umayyads too had kept busy. Their newly rebuilt navy focused on the Western Mediterranean, assisting in the gradual conquest of North Africa and Iberia.
Okay.
However, the ultimate prize still remained Constantinople, and a second massive attack was soon prepared. They were at their strongest levels, while the Byzantine Empire, torn apart by civil war, was at its lowest. For instance, while Umayyads methodically advanced across Anatolia, Emperor Anastasius was usurped by Theodosius, when the entire navy defected, only to then have his brief reign cut short by Leo III. Such infighting made the Umayyad conquest of Anatolia all the more easy, and soon they arrived at the gates of Constantinople with an army said to number over 100,000 men.
That's insane.
2 to 5,000 ships and countless siege engines. In comparison, the defenders of the capital numbered just 15,000. Thankfully, however, the city featured some of the most robust fortifications of its age, which had been further bolstered in anticipation for the siege. The walls had been fully refurbished.
I was gonna say, like, this city seems pretty great to defense, yeah, like, they have to come from the sea. There's walls, just put some of the fire things on the wall, if the walls are like stone. Perfect.
Every tower bristled with artillery. Food had been stockpiled, the garrison well trained, and most important of all, the fire ships were made ready for battle. The Arabic army quickly isolated Constantinople from the Thracian hinterlands, building a double stone wall on either side of the besieging army. When Leo offered to pay the Arabs 1 gold coin for every inhabitant of the city to lift the siege, the Umayyad commander refused. Constantinople would fall here, and with it, the last traces of Roman hegemony. The Arabic fleet arrived soon afterwards to begin the blockade. Because Constantinople was surrounded on most sides by water, any siege would be impossible without a combined arms approach of both a land army and an overwhelming navy.
Yeah,
this, however, is where the Byzantines had their first decisive victory. As the Umayyad ships attempted to cut the city off, Leo sprung his ambush. A small squadron of fire ships assaulted the rear of the Arab fleet. All of a sudden, 20 heavily loaded troop transports...
I'm surprised the invading force didn't try, like, they already, 30, 40 years before, already, like, dealt with the fire ship of the Greek, the Roman, the Byzantine. And yet, like, 40 years later, they come back, and they don't have their own fire ship or anything. They just come back with big numbers, and they expect that they're gonna survive the burning. I'm surprised they didn't try, or maybe they just didn't manage to. Like, they had no idea how the Byzantine did it, maybe.
Burst into flame. Over 2,000 Marines were killed in the matter of a few minutes, as dragon heads gleamed in the sun and bathed their fellow sailors in fire. The rest of the Umayyad fleet was brutally aware that the 40-year-old rumors of what had happened in the last siege of Constantinople were true.
So they knew.
Horrified, they refused to go anywhere near the legendary fire ships. With the fleet now unwilling to even approach the city, it proved impossible.
Otherwise, again, I've got the Uno card solution. Like, they should just use fire arrows to shoot at the fire ship. Maybe that's the solution. Fight fire with fire, right?
Their commanders to enforce their planned blockade. Supplies flowed freely into the city, and even the local fishermen were able to go about their activities as if it were peacetime.
Okay.
To make matters worse, the winter months brought chilling colds which killed off tens of thousands of men and animals. Supply issues also proved fatal. The long logistics route along the Anatolian coast was prone to attack, and countless ships were destroyed en route by Byzantine ambushers, local partisans or pirates. On one occasion, it was said that some 500 grain ships managed to run the gauntlet, bringing a ray of hope. However, this was dashed when the convoy's largely Christian crew chose to defect.
Wow.
This prompted the Emperor to launch new fireship raids, which seized or destroyed the now understaffed supply fleet
and
any warships they could get their hands on. In the aftermath, the invaders were crippled by both starvation and disease.
Yeah.
After little more than a year, the Grand Siege Force was ordered to retreat.
Wait, so I guess he didn't explain it, but did they even try to attack from the land? I'm guessing, he talked about it, there was some crazy walls, but like he talked about they brought some crazy siege weapon and stuff like that, and yet I guess from the way it's portrayed, they never even made it in, like even a little bit inside the city. Just, they stayed outside the city, like slowly dying, and then they lost at the siege. Again, like, this might be the easiest siege I've ever heard about. I mean, not only, I don't know how little like the Byzantine Empire lost in this, but yeah, they were just chilling in the city. I mean, that sounds insane. So easy.
But their struggles were not over.
Oh.
As they desperately attempted to straggle back to their homeland, they were picked off piecemeal. Apparently, over 90% of this enormous invading force was utterly annihilated.
Oof.
Those few who survived would be haunted by the experience and spread the word of the dragons who defended Constantinople.
1,000 years.
This victory allowed the Byzantines to reclaim the seas and take the offensive. Muslim commanders were caught on the back foot for many years, but did eventually develop counters to the fireships. This involved fighting from a distance by means of arrows and artillery, or attempting to attack the fireships from the rear. In addition, they reportedly began to coat their ships in hides soaked in water or vinegar, which could dampen the effects of Greek fire, or at least take the heat as sacrificial protection. Some sources claim that by 900 AD they even attempted to deploy their own fireships after capturing a Byzantine vessel, but these proved pale imitations. Nonetheless, these...
I guess even with the literal model of it, you couldn't replicate it. That's crazy.
Countermeasures at least began to even the odds between the eternal rivals. Other foes of the Byzantines were not so lucky. For instance, in 941 AD, a massive Rus naval force boasting some 40,000 men was launched against Constantinople to take advantage of the seemingly undefended capital. Our sources recount the event as follows. Quote, "The Emperor Romanus, hearing of this, was distracted by various thoughts, for his naval forces were either engaged against the Saracens or occupied in guarding the islands. He spent some sleepless nights in reflection while King Igor devastated the coastlands, and at last he was informed that there were 15 old battered galleys in the yards which had been allowed to go out of commission.
Okay.
Thereupon, he called the ship's carpenters into his presence and said to them, 'Make haste and get the old galleys ready for service without delay. Moreover, put the fire throwers not only at the bows, but at the stern and both sides as well.'"
I was going to say earlier, yeah, like, just put it on all sides. But he said, obviously it's insanely heavy, so I was thinking maybe you can't do it. But no, you can do it. If you put it on all sides, I mean, perfect. Just perfect. Yeah. It's like, if you look from afar and like all sides are firing at the same time, you just see like a ball of fire coming towards you.
When the galleys had been equipped according to his instructions, he called his most skillful sailors and bade them give King Igor battle. So they set out, And when King Igor saw them on the open sea, he ordered his men to capture them alive and not kill them.
No idea.
But the merciful and compassionate Lord lulled the winds and calmed the waves, for otherwise the Greeks would have had difficulty in hurling their fire. As they lay, surrounded by the enemy, the Greeks began to fling their fire all around. And the Rus, seeing the flames, threw themselves in haste from their ships, preparing to be drowned in the water rather than burned alive in their fire. Some sank to the bottom under the weight of their cuirasses and helmets, which were never to be seen again. Some caught fire even among the waves. Not a man escaped, save those who managed to reach the shore. Shortly thereafter, the main Byzantine navy returned. These set upon the Rus.
That's really kind of, I don't know if like the Rus, I was gonna say Russia, but I guess just the Rus at the time. The Rus and the Byzantine had like much interaction before that, but I feel like it's the kind of thing where, yeah, like, you know, you just encountered like hell, some fire ship, you know, it's probably like so, you know, it seems like impossible to even beat, and then it's gonna make you think like what kind of like land craziness had they invented. So that's probably like a good warning of like, yeah, just give up, don't go fuck with the Byzantine Empire at that point. That must be absolutely terrifying. Like you just come with your normal ship and you see such a like leap of technology in front of you. And I guess it's crazy because at that point, like they've been using the fire ship for like 200 years or something. And yet most others don't seem to have catched up to that idea.
Retreating with their accumulated plunder. Once again, fire purged the seas of the barbarians and the entire fleet was said to be destroyed. Devastated and with no effective counter, the Rus soon signed a peace treaty with terms in favor of the Byzantines. In this way was the empire of the Romans able to survive and even thrive for another half millennium, thanks to their fire ships.
Crazy.
However, by the end of the 12th century, the Byzantines were in decline. Weakened both economically and militarily, they had lost access to many regions believed to have supplied the ingredients for Greek fire, and may even have lost the formula itself. It's around this time that Byzantine fire ships all but disappear from our records. As a testament to this, our accounts of the 1203 siege of Constantinople by the Fourth Crusade makes no mention of the dragons, which had once defended the city. Their flames had gone cold, and with them, the empire. Yet, while the secret of the Byzantine fire ships may have been lost, their legend inspired others to follow in their footsteps.
That's what I was going to ask.
The Venetians, for instance, were said to have deployed an imitation of Greek fire on their ships.
I guess if anybody would invent something like that or copy it, would be, the Republic of Venice. Makes sense.
Was blown onto the hulls of enemy vessels through submerged pipes or dropped onto their decks from suspended carriages. However, its effect on the battlefield was never as pivotal as had been the case with the fire ships defending Constantinople. It's incredible to imagine how history might have changed.
Which, you know, this makes me think of like more recent warfare, like, you know, when the ship really advanced in the era of, you know, the pirates, the British Navy, the Spanish Navy. So, you know, like those really big frigates, I think it's called, like, you know, the very big ship with bunch of cannons. I'm thinking like, you know, why were not, did any of them ever try to have like some kind of fire, like fire flamethrower thing? Because at that time, I'm sure, you know, like with the advanced technology, I'm talking about like, you know, 1700, 1800, you know, I feel like it would have been pretty useful rather than just a cannon battle. Like you just get close to the enemy. Well, I guess with cannon you can shoot from pretty far away, right? But if you ever get close to the enemy, you have like one or two fire flamethrower thing, and I feel like that would have vastly changed how powerful, you know, a side would be at that time. The too short range. Yeah, but again, you know, at the time of those bigger ship, wouldn't they sometimes like get close to fire at each other or like to board? So then if you just add even one flamethrower, like you could do insane damage. I mean, you could put the ship on fire and not go into an extended like cannon battle. I wonder.
were it not for the development of this ancient super weapon. What other military technologies do you think?
Yeah, they don't know how to make it, but again, like, you know, you don't really need this type, right? Like, any way to make fire, I'm thinking like 1700, 1800, by now, they, you know, with the advanced technology, like, it's well known, right? So they don't have to make the exact same West grip fire, yeah? I don't know. You know, even Topol.
Come close to matching its legacy.
It burns very fast.
A huge thanks to the patrons for funding the channel and to the researchers, writers, and artists for making this episode possible. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content and check out these other related episodes.
Very good video.
See you in the next one.
Very, very good video. Okay, I mean, I know I had heard about the idea of fire ships before, but I guess I never looked into it. And I guess, yeah, like from this video, it's a super specific thing, right? Like only the Byzantine were really using it. And it only was used for mostly a few battles. So yeah, that's why I didn't know much about it. That's very, very specific. Very interesting though. Okay, super cool. I mean, yeah. Pirates of the Caribbean is just entertainment. Yeah, but I'm not even talking about that. Like, for example, last week we watched the video about Nelson. You know, in a time of like, I mean, I know Pirates of the Caribbean is not accurate, come on. And, you know, like, there was the battle of, what was it, Cape St. Vincent? And that was like a massive, you know, cannon battle, right? And I'm thinking if they had like flamethrowers when they get close to each other at some point, you could probably disable another ship very fast, rather than just shoot it. I don't know. So yeah, super interesting. Very cool, the fire ship, but very fucked up as well, yeah.